So today is 25th of January. A company is going to borrow 2 million in 2 months. So you can see the lag period is 2 months. But he can't just hold his hands for 2 months and be waiting for what interest rate will be. He wants to hedge. Yeah. And the transaction that he wants to hedge is for 3 months. So the way I usually like to draw it today, then you have 2 months lag period. This is a transaction date. Then we have a transaction that lasts for 3 months. So this is the transaction term. So it's 3 months interest that we are worried about. And definitely our fear will always be that interest rate will rise because we have a loan. So we are worried that interest rate might go up. And if we're going to do futures for that, then we have to sell futures. So this guy is afraid that interest rate will go up from its current level of 5%. So currently it's 5%, but he's going to use a contract. The contract that is available is 500,000 3 month interest rate futures to hedge the position. So you can see that for this one, the period of the contract matches exactly as the period that the transaction is exposed for. So which means apportionment might not be necessary for this one, but I'm still going to show it such that you are getting comfortable with how to calculate your number of contract. So which means for this question, our number of contract will be the 2 million that we are trying to hedge divided by the size of the contract, which is 0.5, multiplied by now it's going to be 3/3. Yeah, because they align. And which means how many contracts do we need? That will give us 4 contracts. Extremely important. You must always know the number of contracts that you need. So we have the data from the futures. We have March and June futures. Which of these futures are we going to use for our transaction? Using the same understanding of date selection that I taught you in FX futures. Today is already January, 25th of January, and this transaction will be for 3 months. What features are we going to use?
March.
No, it's going to be March because remember, March futures will be end of January, and this transaction will take place. Remember, what I always say is that you need to choose the future that is earliest after, that will close earliest after your transaction date. Your transaction date will be towards end of March because in 2 months' time, today is 25th of January. So in 2 months' time, you are talking of 25th of March, actually. So the closest feature will definitely be your March features, will make sense. So which means the features that we are selling will be March feature. Before I progress on this, is there any confusion? Okay, so which means today, what we're going to do now is to initiate future transaction, and that will be a sell of March future at what will be our price? It was given as 94 points. What's that? 94.9. And again, if you have a future query at 94.9, what does it mean in terms of interest rates?
It's 5.1%.
5.1%.
Fantastic. So invariably, what we're trying to say is we are looking at 5.1% interest. So it's good for you to just keep that understanding at the back of your mind. Yeah. So, but that is one part. There are always three parts to future transactions, like I always tell you, right? Two things will happen on the transaction date. We will need to close and we will need to do the transaction. So when we want to close this future, we need to buy future. And do we know how much? They gave us the question. They said the futures price has moved to 92.9 in 2 months, which means at that point, we'll be buying at 92.9. So What rate is this? Anyone?
7.1.
7.1%. So invariably, what can you see? How has this rate moved? So you can see, even if you don't know this, which, but I want you to know the rate because you can easily relate with the rates. It's something you're already comfortable with. You can already see that what you're saying is that there is a movement from 94.9 to 92.9. And that is, how much movement is that? 2%.
2%.
Which is the same thing as saying from 5.1% to 7.1%. And that's a movement of 2%. So 2% is how many basis points? How many basis
200.
200.
points?
200.
Fantastic. So that is 200 basis points. So this is your number of ticks. So which means if you want to get your net net profit or loss or net cost or whatever you have, if you go back to that formula where we say we get the number of ticks multiplied by the value of one tick times number of contracts. What is the value of tick in this scenario? So 1 basis point is 0.01%. Multiplied by 500,000. It already told us the contract is 500,000. 3 months. 3 months into years will be 3 divided by 12. So if you do that, you will have 12.5 actually. So that is the value of each tick. So which means to calculate our net position, the number of ticks we already know, interest rate has moved by 200 basis points times 12.5, which is the value of each movement, times 4 contracts that we bought. And if you multiply all of that together, you should have 4, 5, that's 10,000. If you have fixed interest or a borrowing and interest is going up, definitely is a gain. So this is a profit for you. But to get your net situation, final net situation, you can now do the third part, which is the transaction itself. So the transaction itself, how much are we going to be paying for the transaction? The transaction will be at market spot rate, remember, always, always. So which means we'll be borrowing how much? We want to borrow 2 million, multiply by the current market rate. What is the current market rate? They've given us, say, calculate the result of relevant features, edge on the assumption that the interest rate have risen to 7%. And the future price is that, yeah. So the reality of the market is 7%. So which means we'll have to borrow at 7%. That's why we had to edge, because we are not sure what the market will do. And this borrowing is for 3 months. So the times 3 divided by 12. And that will give you 7% times 2 million times 3 divided by 12. And that gives you 35,000. So which means this will be interest expense without edging. So if we had not edged at all, this will be our interest. But because we have edged, we have additional profits,
25,000.
which is 10,000. Yeah. So our net interest cost is actually 25,000. And if you want to convert this to rate, what is that rate? Your net interest cost is 25,000.
Is it
Your principal
5%?
is 2 million. Exactly 5%. That should be pretty straightforward. Okay, nice. So effective interest is 5%. Because that is just saying 25 over 2 million is your rate.
So I got 12.5 or something.
Okay, let me show you. So what you do is you are paying 25K out of 2 million, and that's for 3 months. What
Oh,
is
okay,
that
okay, okay, okay. I
rate?
did apply there. Yeah.
What is that rate? That rate will be times 100. That's 1.25% for 3 months. But your effective interest rate is always for 1 year. So if it's this for 3 months, then for 1 year, that would be 1.25 times 4. That would be 5%. You can use any method you feel comfortable with. It's just mathematics, just applying yourself to that. So, because they might not necessarily say calculate net interest cost, the question might say, what will be the effective interest rate after the hedging? Very important. The same way we spoke about basis when we did about FX swap, I mean FX feature, there's also basis here, and it's not any different from what you know. Yeah. But this is not basis as in interest rate. This is talking about basis in future. Yeah. The future basis. Let me put it like that. So you don't confuse it with interest rate basis.
I think it was the spot minus the future price.
Thank you very well. Spot. So it's same thing here. Spot rate minus the future price. Yeah. So you always use that as well. If you want to take, for instance, if I say, let's say you have a spot rate is let's say 6.5%. Yeah. And the future price is being quoted at 95.5. What is the basis? Everyone for this.
2%.
What's it?
2.
2%. Okay, nice.
Yes, two.
So nice. So everybody, two. It's as simple as that. It's just 6.5 minus 4.5, and that is 2%. Nice. Locking rate as well is applicable here because it's still features that we are talking about. Remember what you use locking rate for? I told you that you use locking rate to work your net outcome immediately without necessarily going through opening, closing, and transaction. This gives you the everything in net once you know your locking rate. For FX, what's our locking rate formula? Who still remembers?
It's original price plus unexpired basis.
Exactly. Original future price plus unexpired basis. And what we're going to be doing is not different from that as well. Yeah. So with interest rate, similar formula will be used, which means you need to know your future price. So that will be your current future price plus unexpired basis. Remember, you know how to calculate basis already. So there will always be unexpired basis. And to make life easy for you, because the future will always be in 100 minus the rate. It will be very important for you to note that. So this gives you a locker, and I'm going to look for an example that we can use to just deal with that quickly. So I want us to do this one. You have company that wants to use June interest rate futures to cover the interest rate risk on a 3 month borrowing that will start 31st of May. And at that time, there's a 500,000 contract available. Yeah, that's been set up 1st of January. So which may talk, so that's about 6 months, right? The base rate is 5% and the future price is 95.48%. That was at the beginning for sure. This company can borrow at the base rate, but we assume that the basis will reduce in a linear manner. Similar to what you learned in FX, that you expect basis to reduce in a linear manner. Once we are seeing that kind of information, you know that definitely you're talking of a possibility of you needing to calculate the closing future price. Once they start giving you this kind of information, you know that you don't know your closing future price most likely. So you must be able to estimate that. Yeah. But I told you that you don't always have to estimate it if you can use your lock-in rate. So you don't have to waste your time. Yeah. So you don't have to go through the long process of calculating on expired basis and adjusting it with the current spot and now working back. If you remember what we used to do, we know that basis will always be equals to spot minus future price. So if you move during the period of your future, like for this one now, if say in May, that's 5 months. For something you are set up in January, as supposed to expire in June, that is 6 months. So if you are closing this transaction in May, it means that you're going to have 1 month on expired basis. So first of all, let me ask you in this question, what's this total basis? So spot currently, this transaction is happening on 1st of January and the base rate has been given to us as 5%. Yeah. What's the future price? First of all, what's the spot? Spot is 95 straight away.
Yeah,
If it's
95. Yeah.
5%, 5% means 95, right? If
Yeah.
this that's what is doing that, yeah. The future price was also given as what? 95.48.
48.
So what's our basis?
48 basis points.
0.48. So we know this is what we expect to have throughout. Remember, this is for the entire time. That would be for the entire time. This is for 6 months. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
however, we expect this to go evenly over the life of the feature. And the life of the feature is 6 months. So, which means each month we expect a basis of 0.48 divided by 6.
Divided by 6,
That's
0.08.
0.08%. So if that happens every month, by the time this is closing
Sorry,
in
quick
May,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Are we supposed to state that assumption, or the examiner would know?
Yes, no, state it, please. Usually they will state it in the question, as you can see here. But if they don't state it, please state that assumption in your response as well. That you assume that basis will reduce in a linear manner. So this transaction will be closing in May, as you can see. Is expected to close in May. If it's going to close in May, that means we need to know what our future price will be in May for us to close the transaction. We don't know this. But we know that basis will always be equals to the spot minus future price. This is what we are looking for. In May, what will be our basis in May?
0.08.
1.
Exactly 0.08.
Okay.
This is beginning 1st of January. So end of January one is gone. End of February one is gone because this is starting 1st of January, as you can see. January, February, March, April, May. 5 is gone actually, yes. So 5 is gone out of 6, and you're left with 0.08 because that's just 1 month left. So the unexpired basis at the end of May is actually just 0.08. Do we have spots at the end of May?
Yes, that's 4%.
They gave us how much is spot?
4%.
4%.
4%. 4%. So if spot is 4%, what's our future? Your future price
Yeah,
will be equals to
3.82.
4% minus 0.08%. And that is what?
3.8.
3 point what?
3.82. Oh, 92.
92%.
3.92.
3.92. Oh,
So that is your future price rate. But remember, future price is not quoted like this. So you need to quote it properly. So if you want to quote it properly, what would that be?
96.08. 100 minus
yeah,
96.
3.08.
96.08.
That's 96.08. And that is saying 100 minus 3.92. So
Okay,
invariably,
so
you're
maybe I
saying
might
that
have missed it. Yeah, I might have missed it earlier on, but we should, since this one is the interest rate, right? We are only going to consider the price as the 100 less the particular interest rate that we are hedging for, right?
that's how future is priced. Price
Okay,
future
okay,
is
all right.
not interest, that interest rate feature particularly is not priced on the rate. It's priced as
Not the
100
rates, but
minus
rather,
interest rate. Yeah. This
okay,
is a
all right,
unique thing about interest rates.
all right.
Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So which means invariably for us to hedge this transaction, remember, A wants us to calculate the financial results when we're using the edge. So now let's look at it. We say every time we want to edge, three things are involved. Number one, we need to initiate. Number two, we need to close.
Close.
Number three, we need to do the transaction. So to initiate, what are we going to do? Are we buying feature or selling feature in this scenario? Are we buying or selling?
We're selling.
Selling.
We're selling.
We're selling. Fantastic. At what price? Let me show it. Let me keep it there. At what price, guys? Quickly.
95.48, no?
95.48.
95.48. Thank you. So we're selling at 95.48. And for us to
Oh, that's
close,
what's
we
going
have
on
to
here.
buy. What rate are we using to buy when we are closing it?
Sorry,
96.08.
96.08.
96.08. You've highlighted it.
Fantastic. You guys are fantastic. I'm very happy. What is the movement of how many ticks is that? Okay. Yeah. So 0.6%. Imagine. So that is how much movement that we've seen in that finish from coming from featured arrangement, initiation and closing. But the transaction itself, how much do we want to borrow? We're planning to borrow 1 million. And remember, the transaction will always take place at the market spot rate on 31st of May, which is 4%. And we need to borrow for 3 months, right? Yes, for 3 months. So which means the transaction itself will give you a rate of 4% times 1 million multiplied by 3 over 12. So how much interest will the transaction go for?
10,000.
So normally we'll pay interest, the transaction will be pay interest of 10,000. What is the tenor of this contract? The future contract you see there is 6 months.
Divided by 5.
Can you see it? It's 6 months. It's using June interest future. Can you see it? June interest future, which means this will expire end of June. And when is this
Oh, okay. That's why we
initiating
did the
it?
6 months. Uh,
Okay.
January 1st.
Exactly. So if you're initiating January 1st for a contract that expires in June, that's 6 months, because you need to understand that not all the time you have it clearly stated that this is a 6 month future. Okay. So if the contract is for 6 months, tell me what's the gain or loss? We know that this is the rate transaction. We have to pay 10,000. Is transaction 1 and 2, we know that it's going to move by 0.6%. And this 0.6%, we know that that is 60 basis points. So with that, we can get the value of tick. So the value of tick straight away is the principal. What is the principal? They gave us the principal of the contract to be 500,000. Is that it?
Yeah, 500,000.
500,000. Multiply by 1 basis point. Always. And instead of me putting 1 basis point, I can just, by now you know what 1 basis point is, so I can put it straight away as 0.01%. Then multiply by the tenure, but the tenure has to be in years. For this one, the tenure is 6 months, and that's 0.5 years. So if you do that, 0.5 times 0.01% multiplied by 500,000, and that gives you value of a tick to be $25. I believe the money they are trying to borrow is in dollars. Yes. So how many ticks? We know the number of ticks per contract is 60 basis points. So that's 60 times 25. And that gives us 1,500. But that is for one contract. So we need to know how many contracts we need for this edge. And that is calculated as the value that we are trying to hedge, the transaction amount we are trying to hedge, divided by the contract value, then divided by the tenure of the contract, which is 6 months, multiplied by the transaction tenure, which is 3 months. If you do that, that gives you 1. So which means the total, is this a loss or gain? It's a loss, but I need to explain to you. Is 1,500 times 1, and that is 1,500. Do you think this is a loss or gain? Or why is it a loss?
We are selling at 95.48 and we are buying at 96.08.
Yeah? Do you get it? You are selling lower than you are buying. Remember, apart from the fact that it comes obvious like this, like, okay, you are selling lower than you are buying, is a loss. The other way you can look at it is that when you are selling a bond, which means you'll be paying interest at what rate? What interest rate is this? Another way to interpret it, interest rate is how much here? That is
4.52.
4.52. And when you are buying bond, at what rate is this? So you're going to be receiving interest at what
3.92.
rate? At 3.92.
3.92.
So you can see that you are receiving interest at a lower rate than you are paying interest. So it's a loss. And you can also see that another way to look at it is that you are selling at 95, you are buying at 96. That's a loss. So that's how you know that this 1,500 is a loss. So which means that the final outcome of your step 1, step 2, step 3. Step 1 and 2 is giving a loss of 1,500. And step 3 is also giving a payment of how much? 10,000. So which means your final outcome is 11,500 payments. And it's like that because without hedging, you will definitely be having a different figure. The fact that you have a loss and your future means that this 10,000 must have incorporated some gain. The market must have been favorable to you. That's why what I mean. So it doesn't mean that you have not hedged because you made a loss. Remember what I said to you. If your hedge is giving you a positive, then your retransaction must have suffered. So it's going to cushion it down. But if your retransaction is benefiting from the market, then your hedge will show you with a loss, such that you are never going to get that benefit. That benefit must go to zero because that is the essence of hedging. It's not for you to make money, it's for you to rather minimize your loss. So we've done it with the normal old way. That's section A. But section B, look at B. We should use our lock-in rate. Lock-in rate, the way we normally do it in a quicker way, using a lock-in rate. Which is what we want to look at now. Remember what I said about lock-in rate? I said all you need to think about is the fact that your lock-in rate formula is 100 minus your current future price plus unexpired basis on the transaction date. In this question, we already calculate our unexpired basis on the transaction date when we're playing with it here. We said it's going to be 0.08. That's what has not been used up. If we assume that the basis will go down to zero on a linear version, so which means our lock-in rate should not be anything difficult. It's just going to be current future price will be what? What's current future price? So remember that your future price you'll be using is the original one, just the same we always do it in FX. When you went into the transaction today, when you are going into that future, what is your original future price? And that is 95.48. That was given because that is what gave rise to the total basis that you're amortizing. So you have 100 minus what's the current future price? Current future price is 95.48, but remember, I'm not going to be using 95.4 because I already brought 100 out for all of them, right? So that is given 95.4 is what rate? What rate is that? Quickly,
4.52.
4.5.
4.52. Oops. And 4.52 unexpired is what? 0.08.
08.
Yeah. So which means that is 100 minus 4. That plus which
4.6.
0.08.
4.6.
Yeah. 4.6.
4.6. Yes. 4.6%. Yeah. So which means it's actually 4.6%, but in terms of pricing, we always price it as 100 minus 4.6.
95.4.
95.4.
Yeah. So another way to say is that our locking rate is at 95.4, which is actually 4.6. Basis and locking rate are different. This is locking rate, not basis. Do you get that? Locking
Yes.
rate is not basis at all. Basis is different. The formula for basis is always the spot. This current is when you are doing the transaction, when you are doing the future. In fact, maybe if the current is confusing you, call it original, just the same way I used to call it in FX future. Your original future price, which was the very first future price that you used to calculate the total basis. is that total basis you expect to go down over the time of that particular future such that it becomes zero at the end. So is that original future price that you always use to calculate your lock-in rate. So, like I said, use this formula to simplify the issue because this unexpired basis is not in 100 times like this. So you're going to be very confused if I have to open up into negative. So that's why I prefer to put in a bracket for you like this. So you know it's just your future price, your original future price plus unexpired basis that gives you the lock-in rate that you're looking for, which is 4.6. And that's what you actually need. So your lock-in rate is 4.6, which means that if you want to get the final outcome, yeah, the final outcome, which is your total cost, because I mean, the loan is going to be cost, always going to be interest expense, is at that 4.6%. And if you want the value itself, that's 4.6%. Remember, the percentage is always annual rate. So the loan is in 3 months, so which means you have to divide by 12 times 3 to apportion that interest rate, multiply by the loan principal. And what does that give you? What do you have?
11,500.
Exactly. I will expect it to be the same as what we had under the long method, 11,500, just like this. You see, just the little calculations you have done to get 11,500 compared to the long method here. And that's the same thing I showed you under FX, how your locking rate can save you time. Because in exams, always use the locking rate to get your net outcome. With that one, you don't need to start doing buy, sell, do transaction. This gives you a locking rate straight away, then you apply it to your principal. But make sure you apportion based on time. Remember, when you're working with interest, it's different from FX. With interest, time is very important, and you must not forget to apportion based on time.